ستبقى معنا السيد سجيني، وسندعو رئيس الجلسة ما قبل الأخيرة السيد أحمد طاهري جوطي. السيد أحمد طاهري جوطي يلتحق بنا لتسيير هذه الجلسة ما قبل الأخيرة، وشكرا لكم.
Well, Assalamu alaikum. I'm calling Ms. Maria Luisa Aldem to join the stage, Rafiuddin Shiko, and Yasmin Urich. Thank you. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. The first question that we may ask ourselves is, why should we be interested in financial inclusion? Why should we be interested in financial inclusion? Let me make it simple. If you are not included in a financial system, this means that you will not get access to adequate financing to get a house or a car or to satisfy your needs. This means that your quality of life will be impacted significantly. If you have the necessary resources and you are excluded from the system, it means that if we bring you to the system, we will do better. So financial inclusion is about enhancing economic development, and it's about people's quality of life. The last Fintech survey, 2017 global survey, mentioned that at global scale, 6% of unbanked people were self-excluded from financial systems for religious concerns. So from a theoretical perspective, Islamic finance can be a solution to include more people, but this is just theory. In practice, it is more complicated. But today, Islamic financial institutions can contribute in including people in the enhancement of financial inclusion. And one way to do this is to adopt Fintech. This is our main topic in this first session, is how Islamic financial institutions can adopt Fintech to achieve financial inclusion. And I'm glad to welcome my speakers. Well, I present them not in details, otherwise we will spend the whole day here. We have Mr. Ayman Sajini, the CEO of the ICD. We have Maria Luisa Aldem, she is a member of Lisbon Parliament and passionate about innovation, economy, and payments. We have Mr. Rafiuddin Shiko, Managing Director at Dinar Standard. And we have Ms. Yasmin Urich, who is managing Western Union Business Solutions Bank network in Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and the remaining parts of the world also. Okay. Well, my first question goes to Mr. Ayman Sajini. We have today, do we have in Islamic finance a particular vision of financial inclusion? And is Islamic finance a solution leading to financial inclusion? And how can Islamic finance be part of the financial inclusion national plans? These are 3 questions in one. Thank you.
Okay. So the financial inclusion that we have thought about in so many different ways, the simple financial inclusion that is known to the world now is through our phones. Basically, you have all of your mobile phones, and everybody has an app of his bank, and from their locations, they don't need to go out from their distant locations. They don't need to go to a branch. And that is one way of including or considering the inclusion of some of them. The second one is, for example, the extreme case that we have whereby a product called Brave. And in Brave, we have the financial inclusion of fragile state or states that are in war. And that usually could help them by getting 3 financial institutions supporting a same client or evaluating one client. In this way, even during wars, all the 3 financial institutions agree into how to fund an SME or even a microfinancing during difficult times. The third one, what we have done, is Brave Women, where we realize that usually women get mostly affected by fragile states or states that are in war, and by having basically financing products that specifically cater to their businesses and focuses on their business needs, because sometimes they're the mostly affected ones. Thank you.
I still have a second question for you, Mr. Sajini. It's about replicating conventional modes of financial inclusion. Can we today in the Islamic finance industry replicate the conventional modes of financial inclusion?
I don't see any reason why we cannot, because all the products that exist in the conventional products usually are more or less traditional, also Sharia compliant in my opinion, and always been the case. It only gets to the point where it doesn't become Sharia compliant. I always tell people that I love drinking water, I love to drink juices and everything else like normal people do. But once it gets to alcohol, that's my limit. That's exactly the same way how I see banking and finance. So traditional banking and Islamic finance is exactly the same for me in everything. We are in line together, and that's the normal human evolution throughout history, that we have the same thoughts and same ideas. But then we stop once it gets to the point where it's abusive or unethical, or it goes to the point where even the current traditional banking have actually figured out that they don't want to continue doing the same products or structures, and let's say because some of them we find out that they're unethical, and that way it became very popular globally to have what they call ethical investments and ethical banking, because it's becoming more and more be realized of the importance of having those habits and realizing how important it is for the end user and for the economy and for the social structure.
Well, the advantage with Mr. Sajini is that he's very precise and concise. I advise my other speakers to be like him, please, to respect the time, because we have another panel after us. So next question is, we have the chance to have among us 2 ladies outside the industry, but they are international experts when it comes to fintech and digitization. I have one question for you, for both of you. Can you give us an overview of fintech innovation leading to financial inclusions at a global scale? Let me start with Ms. Yasmin, please.
Sure, so I totally agree. I think there's... Okay, yeah. I totally agree. I think we currently experience a very strong shift from product focus to consumer focus. So innovation is not always the solution. We have to really understand the customer's requirements and the customer's needs in order to have a successful, innovative product, which can also include people who are currently excluded from those services. So I see that globally, we get to talk to the client more. It's not just about creating a product in marketing or on the product team, but also really going out and understanding the requirements here and building that particular product then to fit those needs. So globally, I would say there's definitely change, but still a lot of work to do, and we are definitely going into the right direction here.
We ask you the same question, but you have 2 hats, the hat of a practitioner and also the hat of the regulator. So we need to...
Okay, thank you so much.
First of all, thank you so much for the invite to be here with you. and to share my vision about our industry. Speaking about innovation and getting global, I agree what Yasmin just said. So I think, first of all, we have to wear our clients' shoes. So we totally must look at the younger generations and to understand that nowadays, the younger generations, they look for something to be faster, to be something with less bureaucracy, and something to answer directly their needs without having to speak with several organizations to just deal with that one thing. Because if we look in our perspective for banking and fintechs, this is what we are doing every day. But our client, they don't care about it. They're just looking for a solution for something. So we just need to answer that for them. We have to provide them a turnkey solution so they don't have to be concerned on details about it. So that's the main thing I think our industry must think about it. About getting global, and I would like to add something on that as well, because we have to think that we are here in Marrakesh, but maybe tomorrow we can be in Europe, tomorrow we can be in South Africa. We are must be a mobility solution as well, so we can think on a global scale. So that's the main thing. On a regulatory perspective, you started to start that question as well. I think technology is always in front of regulation, although regulation can be a starting point to connect the other, the stakeholders, so to connect banks and fintechs to be more competitive, but still not breaking down the industry, so to not disconnect everything. So regulation is important, not to be too much regulation that will just, vanish everything, but just enough in order to provide some kind of organization. And that's what we've done in Europe recently. European Union just settled some standards for banking and fintechs to cooperate, just one unique regulation, that it's PSD2. And we have also GDPR, that's complementary in terms of sharing data of our customers. And this is allowing banks to connect themselves with open APIs, and regulators are also open to start sandboxes in order to fintechs and banks can cooperate and not just breaking down the market. So the future is to cooperate, for sure.
Thank you for this insight. What I understand that today, when we start a digitization process, it's not only about technology. We don't have to focus on technology. We don't have to forget that, first of all, we need to satisfy the customer's needs. This is the first insight. Second insight is that, for the regulatory process, it is here to protect those consumers and to make things more sound. Thank you very much. Well, I move to Mr. Rafiuddin. I'll ask the same questions, but I'll add Islamic. What about Islamic fintech? How it is doing?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and peace and greetings to all. So the perspective I bring as a research and advisory firm that's been focusing on the global Islamic economy and the Muslim consumer market, I think it's a good transition from your point about focusing on the end consumer end needs first. So I have an opportunity, I don't know if we had the chance, but to share with you our latest study on mapping the landscape of Islamic fintech worldwide today, especially that are front-end facing. And so the first and foremost thing when we put the Islamic angle is, if I put the consumer aspect of that, is to understand that consumer dynamic. And today, this consumer of let's say the Islamic inclined financial customer base is demographically one of the youngest in the world. Their technology adoption is some of the highest in the world when you look at markets like Indonesia, Turkey, and so forth. when you look at in terms of the needs from a social, financial inclusion, and if I may broaden that scope to be social needs, social impact needs, which is very well articulated, covered by the SDGs. Some of the biggest needs are from these markets. So I think, technology, I think we're very well articulate, especially from a global context point of view. And even the technology part, we have to really identify what are those tools, but ultimately, we talk about artificial intelligence or mobility or the use of big data, but for what purpose, right? So I think the purpose is front and center. And so from that point of view, when you look at the Islamic consumer market, or even then the retail market or the corporate finance market, the needs are very strong from a social finance point of view. So today when we mapped the landscape of these Islamic fintech solutions, there were about 93 in our 2018 report, which again, if I have an opportunity, I can share some of those insights. And we looked at that, and a lot of the biggest majority of them were P2P finance, about 14 of the 93 in blockchain, and about 15 in wealth management by category. When you look at the distribution from a country point of view, the highest number of those 93 fintech solutions were from Indonesia by a big margin, followed by, interestingly, USA, UK, UAE, Malaysia, and then other group of countries. So, and we had a particular criteria. Now, what's interesting about Indonesia as the biggest currently Islamic fintech activity players is a lot of them are focused on social finance. So one of the examples is Ethis Ventures, that is perhaps one of the leading real estate crowdfunding platform that's addressing low-income housing as an area of social fintech. And I mean, I can go on through that statistic set, but I think I'll stop with that as introduction.
Okay, thank you, Brother Rafiuddin. The good thing is that you reassured me. It means that we're not lagging behind. We are doing our best to be, okay, good. Well, I'd like to come back to a concept that was discussed by our two ladies, which is a collaborative model. How can we bring fintechs and incumbents, existing players, to cope together? Of course, today, in all the Islamic, all the financial systems today, we find that financial authorities are protecting, if not overprotecting, incumbents. So, for fintechs, they are, I would say, obliged to cope with those incumbents in order to evolve and to reform the financial services. So, in your point of view, the question is for our three panelists, and Mr. Ayman, if you have any additional comments on that, also, how can we build a collaborative model that gathers both incumbents and fintechs, and how can we create those ecosystems? Maybe Brother Rafiuddin will talk about Islamic fintech ecosystems, where we can gather all these people in one place. We'll start with maybe with Yasmin. Thank you.
Sorry. Sure. So this is a very good question because unfortunately it's very relevant and a really present challenge. From our perspective, it all begins with the mindset. So people have to be open and willing to change and to work together. So what has to be done here is more collaboration, but from our perspective, it starts with education, right? So if a bank approaches or fintech approaches a regulator and we start talking about blockchain or artificial intelligence and they don't know what it is, then the first human instinct is more likely to be afraid of it, because I really don't know what it is. So the first step would be definitely education and having open conversations and really talking to each other, sitting down and working through it and going into detail what the innovation or the technology really is, what the challenges are, what the opportunities are, and what can be done here. So that's definitely one thing. And then, like you already said, we need to collaborate and we should bring more stakeholders on board. We need to include not just the banks, but also the fintechs, the regulators. And in order to achieve that, there has to be added value for each stakeholder, because if I'm a regulator and I don't really see how this would benefit me, then I'm less likely to change and put time and energy and my own education into that. So added value for each stakeholder, make sure we all win, but this has to happen for each country to actually stay competitive. So again, it starts with the mindset, and from there on, it is a lot about communication and education.
Well, we talked about collaboration between fintechs and existing players. I have an additional question. Could incumbents cope together to build this ecosystem, or is it just every incumbent, every Islamic, or every bank is an empire in itself, isolated from the other empires? And how could we build this? Should we build this partnership between incumbents or not, and why? Thank you. Yeah.
Well, I think we could, of course, but if you want to look a bit further and look on a global scale, this cooperation on fintechs and banks, it's almost like a survival thing. Because if you look, for example, I always give this example for Alipay. Alipay for me, it's actually a fantastic example on how to position yourself as a company. Alipay started as a payments company, and as the name says, payment. But nowadays, they don't position themselves in payments anymore because payments are just a detail on their solution. So they position themselves as some kind of an application or a solution to manage your life. So they have everything about you to help you to manage your life. So payments are actually a detail on your daily life. It happens that you need payments to manage your life. It's a detail. So this cooperation on financial services and financial inclusion, I think it's actually a survival thing. So you need to cooperate not only between banks, but also with other technologies and also with governments to be more competitive, not only for your own country, but to look all over for your customers and to look all over for the other solutions that might come to your country. So that's what you have to look for.
Well, Mr. Ayman, do you have?
Yes, the whole idea why we wanted to think as a group an ICD to connect all the 100 financial institutions is to speed up the connection and also benefit from each other's technology advancements in one side, because there are some institutions that have advanced themselves very fast and the others haven't, and they could actually learn from them, and by that copy-paste what is the benefit. Another thing that we thought about is also some asset management products that can be cross-sold to each one of them and use the blockchain and maybe ensure that these products are actually comfortable for people to invest in. The third point of view, which maybe some don't find it that much of financial inclusion, I was recently in Sri Lanka and I've been honored to be invited into a very great event that they had. It's regarding supporting orphans that after the age of 18 in Sri Lanka, they lose the home that takes care of them. And that's financial inclusion. They have basically created an investment fund for them throughout their life to get to that point, hoping that this type of a system could be also included in all the 100 financial institutions as a concept. It's a great idea that really supports the inclusion of the ones that sometimes are really forgotten. So there are great ideas in the financial technology world that can be replicated and easily utilized by others if they choose to do so.
Okay, we will talk about the Islamic.
Yeah, well, I don't have to be just Islamic because we live in a global world and you have to have a global context. I just wanted to point out there's actual research now, and I believe it's the latest one from PwC, that shows this notion or this concern or that the existing incumbent financial institutions have that banking is going away. As a matter of fact, is not necessarily true. As in fact, there are advantages that the existing incumbents offer that the early stage or fintech startups don't have, i.e. trust as being one of them in terms of the end user trust and the scale and the regulatory experience and so on and so forth. So I think where that question today exists, I believe, in terms of where the market is, both need each other. The startups need these incumbents to be able to scale and reach the markets. So both need each other, and I think we're seeing that happen. So I thought that was quite insightful and relevant to your question.
Well, my next question is for Ms. Maria and Mr. Ayman too. It's about regulation. Do we need to regulate fintech world? I mean, should we regulate every little new innovation? Because if I can't, as a startup, as a fintech, if I cannot launch my offer to the public, I need a license. Well, the financial authorities will tell you if you need a license, we have to create or to initiate a regulatory framework. So a regulatory framework would take a lot of time before it goes. And this will limit innovation. And do you think that we do really need regulation for any new innovation? And if yes, what is the best process to have? And how can we deal with regulation versus innovation? How can we manage this? We'll start with the ladies first.
Well, I do believe we do need some kind of regulation, but not too much regulation, as I said before. And for example, in Europe, we have different types of levels on regulation depending on what you're doing. Of course, if you want to start a project, I think the smartest way is without the umbrella of that type of regulation, and to just partner with a bank or a fintech already under this regulation. So let's just start, or even to have the solution as the Netherlands have on the sandbox solution. So you will have regulation, but there are some steps you need to achieve first in order to be regulated. So I think there are steps to go. What are the main challenges if we don't have regulation? Well, it's difficult to deal, and probably your customer won't trust the products and the services you are providing. So I believe you have to be under some type of regulation.
To put it in two different points, one way I would like to say that lots of regulators globally now have the sandbox concept, whereby anyone that has a kind of financial technology and they're interested to put it in the market, and they want to use the financial regulated entities to conduct such a transaction, they can actually more or less test it there under the eyes of the regulator, get the regulator comfortable with the concept, and then test it also under the regulator monitoring processes, and then take it to the public. And that's, I think, the way how it comforts all the regulators and comforts also the users of those financial technology. Now, there's other theory whereby people are saying, but some regulators did fail us in so many different ways, and we want to go on our own, and that's why maybe cryptocurrency came out, and so on. But then they had to still find a way to regulate themselves. And that's why you hear about blockchain coming up, because it will ensure that whatever is not regulated kind of has a trace to it, a track to it, and so on. So more or less humans do want to get comforted that there is some framework that everybody can understand. It's a standard. And it's not just in the financial world. I would say it's same way in the food. Just when you go out and you look for a restaurant, if you go internationally somewhere and you really don't know the food style, you'll go for the big international names that everybody knows, and you'll just have your meal and leave. And this way you're comfortable that you got what you wanted with the standard that you wanted it. There are others that want to explore, and they sometimes, fail and so on. It happens too. So I think the world would, one way or another, go back and feel more comfortable to be in a regulated environment, as it comforts everybody, whether it's the user or the regulator or the financial institution itself.
So, where I understand that you are not against regulation, you're with a moderated regulation. Perfect. Well, my next question is for Mr. Rafiuddin, is about how can we create Islamic fintech innovation ecosystems. Now, as you know, if we talk about regulation, it's a layer of complexity that can limit innovation. In Islamic finance, we have a second layer, which is Sharia. So we have to pass through these layers in order to launch the offer. So how can we, what are the key success factors that can enhance the development of Islamic fintech ecosystems?
I don't think we need a separate ecosystem for sure, and it's already being evidenced by the fact that we have various sandboxes within the IDB member countries, Bahrain, Fintech Bay, in Dubai, DFC, Fintech Hive. In Indonesia, there's regulation supporting Islamic crowdfunding, all in context of the wider fintech regulations. So in context of your question of creating ecosystems, and as we just heard about, creating these sandboxes and a regulatory environment, I think the same things apply to the Islamic fintech. It's just, it's a layer, but it doesn't affect development of the Islamic fintech ecosystem. It's a layer that exists if you're a fintech with a certain kind of a regulatory requirement of crowdfunding versus cryptocurrency versus something else. I think a similar layer applies, but I don't think the ecosystem gets affected too much. Recent example is I know DIFC does their Fintech Hive accelerator program, and one of the verticals is Islamic fintech. So, I think that's my sense so far. I don't know.
Well, thank you. Well, generally we are trying to link fintech to financial inclusion because most of the time, and if we come back to if we check the fintech survey, we find that the most unbanked people are excluded because of the high value of and high cost of financial services. So that's why we are emphasizing on fintech as a way to lower this cost. And the idea is that not to just include people, because payments and the mobile payments and all these examples that are creating success stories in Eastern Africa are just the first stone, but we can build on it other things. For example, let's take the example of M-Pesa, for example. In Kenya, there was another company which is called M-Kopa. They used the mobile payment in order to sell their services for solar panels. And through the M-Pesa, you can pay for every day an amount of rental of the panel solar. If you don't pay this day, the panel is locked from distance. And another example is Econet, which provides index insurance based on mobile payments. So, I mean, financial inclusion and the mobile payments and fintech is just the first block. What are the blocks that can we add to the ecosystem so that we can provide new services and new high added value services? You can. Do you have any experiences or examples to share with us on that issue? Okay. Sorry.
Thanks. If you don't mind, I can just share my view on it. I think people are looking for Amazon in their lives. So they're looking for marketplaces, and not only on a product perspective, but also in finance as well. So they don't want to be in several banks, in several stores, in several places. They want the information to just appear to them. So in a natural way. So that's the challenge, I think, in all the industries we have nowadays, that we have to provide, that's why it's so important to cooperate, because we have to provide just one solution to our customer, and inside of that solution, he can access all. I think that's the key. It's to provide a turnkey solution to the customer in order to have just one place to do it all.
Now, yesterday we were talking, we had a discussion, and we talked about the leadership. Means today, if I decide to start a process of digitization, I have to pay attention to the pace of digitization in a country. And if my pace of digitization is faster than the one of the country, it means that I'm the leader. So my question is, what is the request, what is the prerequisite to be a leader in terms of digitization in a country or in a region? What kind of leadership do we expect in this area? So, Yasmin, please.
I would like to talk about 3 things in particular. So the first one would be to be able to lead beyond boundaries. So we need to get out of our silos. A boundary could be our department, could be our function, or even just our own organization. We have to start looking at things globally, and we have to look at the entire world, and we also have to lead beyond those boundaries that we've previously seen in the industrial area. So now in the digital age, that is extremely important, to be able to lead across different stakeholders, different languages, and different levels of expertise and bring that together. So that's very much relating to communication and keeping that open mind. The second thing definitely is to build trust and cultivate a higher trust culture, because without trust, we are less likely to collaborate. I will not collaborate with anyone I don't fully trust. So we need to go back and build trust and try to move away from just being authoritative. And trust has to be earned and demonstrated, but that is the foundation that you have to build within your organization and beyond in your collaborative efforts. And then the third one is to keep learning, because change and innovation is coming from anywhere, from anyone at any given time. There are new technologies coming up, new solutions coming up, and new ideas, and we have to stay on top of those. We have to constantly learn and keep a growth mindset and move away from our stagnant mindset that there's only one way how things can work. That's really old thinking we need to try to get out of. So keep learning, even if you're already the CEO and you have a lot of expertise, keep that, but build on top of that and constantly do that, and also share what you learn. Don't hoard your knowledge to yourself. Also make sure you share and you talk about it. And that's how I think successful leadership looks like now and in the future.
I think she said almost all. I think there's another thing. I think you have to be the first. So you have to move fast. That's the thing I recommend.
What about lobbying?
Oh, lobbying as well, and that's why I've said previous that the governments are also important to be involved in this, because it's a strategic move, and you have to think on a global perspective, as she said.
I think if I can add to Ms. Yasmin and Maria's point about a couple of things that struck to me that I wanted to emphasize with some examples. One is when I think we have not brought up the term millennial or the Gen Z. I think we have to look at lifestyle, and I think when you give the example of Amazon, for example, there is a new digital-only bank in UAE called LIV, L-I-V, which is essentially ENBD, the largest bank. But what is incredibly insightful there is they didn't just, first of all, they realized they were focusing on millennials' needs. So that was set up for a different need and was not set up as a bank, but as a lifestyle solution. So it is where they can find movies and they can do everything. So the notion and nature of financial services is changing, but I'm applying that in context of also social inclusion, financial inclusion is that we have to look at it broadly in terms of what lifestyle needs you serve. Second point, critically, which Ms. Yasmin alluded to, but I wanted to emphasize is, when we're connecting fintech with financial inclusion or social impact, let's be careful to not get stuck in the technology as innovation only. Today, innovation is equally important in terms of business process innovation or business model innovation. And I'll give a very specific example within our Islamic financial services. Some of us have heard about Ahuwat. So Ahuwat is a zero microfinancing solution out of Pakistan, an excellent case study that has been recognized within the ISDB ecosystem as well, that does 0%, zero interest zero financing, and they figured out a model to be sustainable, and it's, I think, over $25 million in a very short amount of time. So solving for today's needs in terms of innovation can come from minus tech as well. I think it's something to also keep in mind. Obviously, I'm not negating the importance, but sometimes we lose sight that there are other ways to innovate, because ultimately the goal is to solve for the social problems or the needs. So.
Well, according to the organizers, we still have 5 minutes. I'd like to have comments, 1 minute comments for each speaker. We'll start with Mr. Ayman, and I have a question. Do ICD have plans for us in terms of fintech and digitization? What are the initiatives and the plans for digitization? Thank you.
Well, I think it's going to be a very exciting time that we're getting ourselves into. Lots of technology, lots of innovations are happening. I just want to remind everybody that for the past 3 decades at least, we've been having financial technologies that's been known to everybody, like e-commerce, B2B, e-banking, phone banking. It's just an evolution towards more app-producing products. And it's going to be more and more exciting, and you have to embrace all the new technologies and thoughts. It's not easy sometimes to adapt to each one of them, but it's a future, and it's an enjoyable future in my personal opinion. And that's the main reason why we have, as ICD, included all the 100 financial institutions on one platform, and I've been grateful that they have accepted the idea, because that's where they can share with each other all the latest technology from each other and from each country that they're in, and take the world forward to a new world that will be much more fun to be in. Thank you.
So my recommendation is it's very important to have events like this and to come together, and we've seen a lot of different banks present here today, and I really encourage all of you to keep those conversations going, try to keep the focus on the human aspect despite the innovation that's happening, really try to connect on a human level, keep working on collaborations and really coming up with solutions. And I think we are just at the foundation of all the change that we're going to see in the next few years. So yeah, my closing comment also is to really just try to keep up and learn from each other, be more open and have a global mindset and global perspectives.
Well, I don't have actually anything else to add on this wrapping up. I would just like to share with you another global solution that for me it's an example that it's what MasterCard is doing. I don't know if you looked at the process, but MasterCard, it's now behind the most innovative projects all over the world. They are with Revolut, they are with N26, they are with so many other companies around the world. And so they are not the brand that it comes up first when you look at those solutions, but they are behind. So to just add this detail on the perspective of how we can gain more customers, because that's why we are discussing this over here. It's the cooperation will lead to more customers to our institutions, and that's what we are looking for as well. Thank you.
I think if I can put it perhaps in context of ICD as the host of this session, very inspiring to hear about the plan to bring the 100 financial institutions together. And I guess the question would be, how do we link fintech as an enabler through those financial institutions? And I'm sure that's part of your strategy, Mr. Ayman. And I think, because ultimately it's the end user that you want to reach, in particular in context of ICD's mandate, the private sector, so SME financing. So I think I'd hone in straight to fintech, SME financing in those markets where you have those partnerships. And then, from an ecosystem point of view, there's the regulatory cover in those markets that ICD could provide, because the jurisdictions you're looking at will need that. They're not at a stage where even the sandboxes are there or the regulatory awareness is there. So that, and then the second is obviously getting the financial institutions linking up with SMEs and startups and having that engagement. And finally, obviously investment especially ICD coming in, obviously will support to the extent it can, but unless the Islamic VC or Islamic capital also is brought into play, we're going to be going in circles, and ultimate traction happens when we get the financial institutions also involved at the ground level. So that's sort of my 3 points.
Thank you. I would like just to summarize the main ideas and the main insights that were shared here. First of all, we talked about focusing on customer. When we start a digitization process, we don't need to focus on technology. It's about customer. We are trying to serve better the customer, not the technology. Second thing is today we need to build collaborative model where incumbents and fintechs can cope together in order to build high added value financial services and to revolutionize those services instead of just reforming them. The third insight is about leadership. What kind of leadership we need? When you are the first one to start, well, you have the luck to be the first one, but you need to manage all the constraints that a leader always face. Another insight is about regulation. We're not against regulation. We need a regulation that is moderate, that is reactive, that follows the needs of the market and the fintech and incumbents' interests. Well, these are the most important ideas and insights that were shared during our session. I'd like to thank the speakers and the guests, and thank you very much. I don't think we do have a question-answer session. Yes, we do have? No, okay. So we can move to the next session. Thank you very much. Thank you to our guests.
إذن شكرا لكم السيد أحمد طاهري جوطي رئيس الجلسة، وشكرا للسيدات والسادة المتحدثين.